Halina po at pakinggan ang isa pa nating kapatid na narrator na si Kamatayan Horror Stories. Nagtatampok ng mga kwentong hango sa mga totoong pangyayari na batay sa mga pinadalang kwento ng kababalaghan o kaya'y kathang isip lamang. Nasa description box po ang link sa kanyang channel. Please subscribe. Salamat.
The story that you are about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts, featuring characters, events, or places that has played a role in shaping history. Please sit back and listen as I recite this narrative for you.
In what became known as the Morse murders, Ian Brady and his partner, Myra Hindley, sexually assaulted and murdered young children and teenagers, then buried their bodies along the Saddleworth Moor in the 1960s. The victims were 5 minors ranging between the ages of 10 and 17: Pauline Reed, John Kilbride, Keith Benet, Leslie Ann Downey, and Edward Evans. At least 2 of them were sexually assaulted. 2 of the victims' graves were discovered on Saddleworth Moor, and a 3rd grave was discovered there in 1987, more than 20 years after the perpetrator's trial. Benet's body is still undiscovered despite repeated searches in the area. Ian Brady was born on January 2, 1938 in Glasgow, Scotland, with the name Ian Duncan Stewart. Peggy Stewart, his mother, was a 28-year-old single mom who worked as a waitress. The name of his father is unknown. Brady was put in the care of Mary and John Sloan when he was 4 months old because his mother couldn't afford to care for him. Stewart visited her son when he was 12 years old, but she never told him she was his mother. The Sloans had 4 other children, and despite their efforts to make Brady feel he was part of their family, he remained distant and was unable to engage with others. Brady took their family name and became known as Ian Sloan. He was a troublesome child and prone to throwing angry tantrums. Brady showed above average intelligence early on, despite his disciplinary issues. He was admitted to Shawlands Academy in Glasgow, a high school for above average pupils, when he was 12 years old. The academy, in which is known for its pluralism, provided Brady with an environment in which he could fit in with the multicultural and diverse student body, despite his background. Brady was intelligent, but his laziness overshadowed his academic achievements. He tended to isolate himself from his peers and the norms of his age group's activities. World War II seemed to be the only subject that piqued his interest. He became enthralled by the human atrocities that took place in Nazi Germany. By age 15, Brady had been to juvenile court twice for petty burglary. Forced to leave Shawlands Academy, he began working as a tea-boy at a Govans shipyard. 9 months later, he began working as a butcher's messenger boy. Within a year, he was arrested again for a series of small crimes, including threatening his girlfriend, Evelyn Grant, with a knife for attending a dance with another boy. To avoid being sent to a reform school, the courts agreed to place Brady on probation, but with the condition that he go and live with his birth mother. By then, Brady's mother had moved to Manchester and married an Irish fruit merchant named Patrick Brady, whose surname he took in an effort to solidify the feeling of being part of family unit. Patrick helped Brady find a job at Smithfield Market. This was his chance to start a new life, but it didn't last long. Brady remained an outcast, reading books on torture and sadomasochism, particularly those written by Friedrich Nietzsche and Marquis de Sade, which piqued his interest in sadism. He was arrested for the theft of a sack full of lead seals that he was trying to smuggle out of the market a year later and sentenced to 2 years in a reformatory. He used his time in prison to educate himself about crime, as he was no longer interested in earning a legitimate living. Brady was released from the reformatory on November 14, 1957, and returned to Manchester, where he took various labor-intensive jobs, all of which he hated, and was fired from another job in a brewery. He taught himself bookkeeping using training manuals he obtained from the public library after deciding he needed a desk job. He got an entry-level bookkeeping job at Millward's Merchandising in Gorton on January 1959 when he was 20 years old. His co-workers described him as a quiet, punctual, but irritable young man. Myra Hindley, one of the secretaries, developed a serious crush on him and tried numerous methods to attract his attention. He reacted to her in the same way he reacted to everyone else: disinterested, detached, and somewhat superior. After a year of flirting, Brady finally noticed Myra and asked her out on a date, and since that day, the two became inseparable. Myra Hindley was born on July 23, 1942 in Crumpsall and raised in Gorton, Manchester's working-class neighborhood at that time. When she was a child, her parents, Nellie and Bob Hindley, beat her on a regular basis. Her father was an alcoholic ex-military man who was a strict disciplinarian. He was a firm believer in an eye for an eye and taught Hindley how to fight at a young age. She would physically confront the male bullies at school, often leaving them bruised and with swollen eyes, in order to gain her father's approval, which she craved. Hindley worked as a junior clerk at a local electrical engineering firm for her first job. She ran errands, made tea, and typed, and she was so well liked that when she misplaced her first week's pay, the other girls organized a collection to replace it. At 17, she became engaged after a brief courtship, but called it off several months later after deciding the young man was immature and unable to provide her with the life she wanted. In January 1961, then 18-year-old Hindley joined Millward's as a typist and soon became infatuated with Brady, even though he had a criminal record. After their first date, they realized that they were soulmates. Brady was the teacher in their relationship and Hindley was the obedient student. They would read Nietzsche, Mein Kampf, and De Sade together. Hindley began to emulate an ideal of Aryan perfection, bleaching her hair blonde and applying thick crimson lipstick. They watched X-rated movies and browsed pornographic magazines for hours. When Brady told Hindley there was no God, she stopped going to church. Hindley was Brady's first lover, and she was frequently left to tend to her bruises and bite marks as a result of their love-making sessions. He would occasionally drug her and then photograph her in various pornographic positions, which he would later share with her. Hindley began to change her appearance further, wearing clothing considered risque such as high boots, short skirts, and leather jackets, and the two became less sociable to their colleagues. She changed her style of clothing based on Brady's desires. As Brady's control over Hindley grew, so did his unreasonable demands, which she would do everything she could to meet. Brady had finally found a partner who was willing to enter a sadistic, macabre world where rape and murder were the ultimate pleasures. For Hindley, it meant experiencing pleasure from their perverse and brutal world, yet avoiding the guilt for those desires since she was under Brady's control. Although Hindley was not a qualified driver, she often hired a van in which the couple planned to commit bank robberies, though it didn't really come true, but became more interested in taking photographs of each other, which in that era was considered explicit. Brady moved in with Hindley at her grandmother's house by June 1963. According to Hindley, Brady began to talk about committing the perfect murder in July 1963, like Meyer Levin's fiction novel Compulsion, where two well-to-do young men attempted to commit the perfect murder of a 12-year-old boy and was able to escape the death penalty because of their age. Brady and Hindley murdered their first victim, Pauline Reed, 16 years old, who attended school with Maureen, Hindley's younger sister. Pauline was walking down the street around 8 p.m. when Hindley pulled over in a van and asked for her help to find an expensive glove that she had lost in the Saddleworth Moor, and because Pauline knew her, she agreed to help. Hindley drove to the Saddleworth Moor and Brady met the two shortly after. He led Pauline onto the moor. According to Hindley, Brady returned alone after half an hour and took her to the spot where Pauline lay dying. Pauline was raped and nearly decapitated by 2 cuts to her throat. Hindley stayed with Pauline while Brady retrieved a spade he had hidden nearby on a previous visit, then returned to the van while Brady buried Reed, but according to Brady, Hindley took part in the sexual assault. John Kilbride, 12 years old, was at a market in Ashton-under-Lyne, Lancashire, when he accepted a ride home from Brady and Hindley in the early evening of November 26, 1963. They told him his parents might worry that he was out so late, and they also promised him a bottle of sherry. Once inside the car, they told him they need to make a quick stop at their house to get the sherry. Then another quick detour to look for Hindley's missing glove. They then took him to the moor where Brady sexually assaulted Kilbride and tried to slit his throat with a 6-inch serrated blade before strangling him with a shoelace or string. Hindley asked 12-year-old Keith Benet for help unloading some boxes into her mini pickup. Keith was on his way to his grandmother's house, and she told him that she will drop him off at her place afterwards. Brady was in the back of the van. Instead of driving to Keith's grandmother's house, they passed by Saddleworth Moor to supposedly look for a lost glove. Brady went off with Keith and after about 30 minutes came back alone. Brady told Hindley he had raped, beat, and strangled him to death, then buried him. Brady and Hindley was attending Boxing Day at the fairgrounds on December 26, 1964, when they noticed Leslie Ann Downey, who was 10 years old, alone. They approached her and deliberately dropped some of the packages they were carrying, then asked her help in taking the packages to their car, and then to Wardlebrook Avenue. At the house, Downey was undressed, gagged, and forced to pose for photographs before being raped and killed, perhaps strangled with a piece of string. Hindley later maintained that she went to fill a bath for Downey and found her dead when she returned. Brady claimed that Hindley killed Downey. The following morning, Brady and Hindley drove Downey's body to Saddleworth Moor and buried her, naked with her clothes at her feet, in a shallow grave the following day. Hindley drove Brady to Manchester Central Railway Station, where she waited outside in the car while he selected a victim on the evening of October 6, 1965. After a few minutes, Brady came back with Edward Evans, a 17-year-old apprentice engineer, and introduced Hindley as his sister. Brady had seen Edward before in a gay bar he had cruised looking for victims. They drove to Brady and Hindley's home at Wardlebrook Avenue, where they relaxed over a bottle of wine. There, Edward suffered a horrific death. In the early morning of October 7, 1965, David Smith, who was Hindley's brother-in-law, having married Maureen, her younger sister, walked to a public phone and called the police station to report a murder he had witnessed earlier. He was armed with a screwdriver and a bread knife in case he needed to defend himself from Brady. Maureen and David Smith started hanging around Hindley and Brady after they moved closer to them. Smith was no stranger to crime, and he and Brady would often discuss robbing banks together. Brady wanted to manipulate Smith into becoming a willing partner and commit crimes with them. Smith was picked up by a police car and driven to the police station. He told the officers that he was at the home of Hindley and Brady when he heard a blood-curdling scream. Smith stated that he ran inside the living room and saw a young man. Brady was standing over him with an axe in his hand that he used to hit the young man on his head repeatedly. Shocked and frightened that he would become their next victim, Smith helped the couple clean up the blood, then wrapped the victim in a sheet and placed it in an upstairs bedroom. He then promised to return the next evening to help them dispose of the body. The police examined the Brady residence within hours of Smith's call and discovered Evans' body. Brady claimed during interrogation that he and Evans had a fight and that he and Smith murdered Evans and that Hindley was not involved. Brady was charged with murder and Hindley was charged with being an accessory to murder 4 days later. David Smith told police how he was asked to pack various items into a suitcase by Brady, but that he did not know where it was hidden. He suggested that maybe it was at the railway station, since Brady had a thing about railway stations. On October 15, the police searched the lockers at Manchester Central and found a suitcase which contained 9 pornographic photographs taken of Downey, naked and with a scarf tied across her mouth, and a 16-minute audio tape recording of a girl identifying herself as Leslie Ann Weston, screaming, crying, and pleading to be allowed to return home to her mother. Donnie's mother later confirmed that the recordings was of her daughter. The name John Kilbride was also found written in a book. There were several hundred pictures in the couple's home, including several taken on Saddleworth Moor. Suspecting that the couple had been involved in some of the cases of missing children, a search party of the Moors was organized. 12-year-old Patricia Hodges, a neighbor, told police that one of the favorite sites in Saddleworth Moor was along A635 road where Brady and Hindley used to take her. On October 16, an arm bone was discovered protruding from the peat. Donnie's body was identified by the clothes that she was wearing when she was buried by her mother. 5 days later, they found the badly decomposed body of John Kilbride, which had to be identified by clothing. The investigating officers suspected Brady and Hindley of murdering other missing children and teenagers who had disappeared from areas in and around Manchester over the previous few years, and the search for bodies continued after the discovery of Kilbride's body. But with winter setting in, it was called off in November. Brady was charged with murdering Edward Evans, John Kilbride, and Leslie Ann Downey. Hindley was charged with murdering Edward Evans and Leslie Ann Downey and for harboring Brady after she knew he had killed John Kilbride. Both Brady and Hindley pleaded not guilty. Hindley claimed she only took part in the killing because she was being blackmailed with the release of her pornographic photos by Brady. On the witness stand, Brady admitted to hitting Evans with the axe but not doing it with the intention of murdering him. After listening to the tape recording of Leslie Ann Downey and clearly hearing the voices of Brady and Hindley in the background, Hindley admitted that she was brusque and cruel in her treatment of the child because she was afraid that someone might hear her screams. As to the other crimes committed on the child, Hindley claimed to be in another room or looking out of the window. On May 6, 1966, the jury took 2 hours of deliberation before returning a verdict of guilty of all charges for both Brady and Hindley. Brady was sentenced to 3 terms of life imprisonment, and Hindley received 2 life sentences and a concurrent 7-year sentence. After spending almost 20 years in prison, Brady allegedly confessed to the murders of Pauline Reed and Keith Benet while he was being interviewed by Fred Harrison, a newspaper journalist, a confession that Brady claimed never took place. Based on that information, the police reopened their investigation, but when they went to interview Brady, he was described as scornful and uncooperative. Police decided to resume their search of Saddleworth Moor, once more using the photographs taken by Brady and Hindley to help them identify possible burial sites. In November 1986, Benet's mother wrote to Hindley begging to know what had happened to her son, and though she refused to admit any involvement in the killings, she agreed to help by looking at photographs and maps to try and identify spots she visited with Brady. Later, Hindley was taken to Saddleworth Moor but was unable to identify anything that helped the investigation of the missing children. On February 10, 1987, Hindley made a taped confession to her involvement in the murders of Pauline Reed, John Kilbride, Keith Benet, Leslie Ann Downey, and Edward Evans. She did not confess to being present during the actual murders of any of the victims. When Brady was told of Hindley's confession, he did not believe it. But once he was given details that only he and Hindley knew, he knew that she had confessed. He also agreed to confess, but with a condition that could not be met, which was a way to kill himself after confessing. Hindley again visited the moor in March 1987, and although she was able to confirm that the area that was being searched was on target, she could not identify the exact locations of where the children were buried. On July 1, 1987, Pauline Reed's body was found buried in a shallow grave close to where Brady had buried Leslie Ann Downey. Brady had been cooperating with the police for some time, and when this news reached him, he made a formal confession to DCS Topping, and in a statement to the press said that he too would help police in their search. 2 days later, Brady was taken to the moor but claimed that the landscape had changed too much and he was unable to help in the search for Keith Benet's body. A fresh search for Benet's body began in 2003 with new technologies providing hope of a breakthrough. None came, however, and the search ended unsuccessfully in 2009, with police stating that they would not reopen the search a fourth time without fresh evidence. Bené's mother, Winnie Johnson, died in 2012. She never discovered the whereabouts of her son's remains and was never given the opportunity to lay him to rest. Although Brady and Hindley had confessed to the murders of Reed and Bené, the Director of Public Prosecutions, or the DPP, decided that nothing would be gained by a further trial as both were already serving life sentences. No further punishment could be inflicted. Following his conviction, Brady was moved to HM Prison Durham, where he asked to live in solitary confinement. He spent 19 years in mainstream prisons before being diagnosed as a psychopath in November 1985 and sent to the high-security Park Lane Hospital, now Ashworth Hospital, in Maghul, Merseyside. He made it clear that he never wanted to be released. Brady went on a hunger strike at the high-security Ashworth Psychiatric Hospital in October 1999, demanding the legal right to starve himself to death rather than serving the remainder of his life in prison. This demand was refused by the High Court in March 2000, which upheld the hospital's right to force-feed him. He died on May 15, 2017, after receiving end-of-life care for a restrictive pulmonary disease. He was cremated without a ceremony and his ashes disposed of at sea during the night. Hindley lodged an unsuccessful appeal against her conviction immediately after the trial. She corresponded with Brady by letter until 1971, when she ended their relationship. The two remained in sporadic contact for several months. Hindley was told that she should spend 25 years in prison before being considered for parole, but her tariff was increased to 30 years in 1985. She suffered a brain aneurysm in 1999 and died in prison on November 15, 2002, from complications brought on by heart disease. Reportedly, over 20 undertakers refused to cremate her remains. 4 months later, her ashes were scattered by her ex-partner, Patricia Cairns, one of her prison wardens.
Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took the time to listen to my narration. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I am Twisted Mind and please enjoy the rest of your day. Salamat!